Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the introduction, Annette. As Annette said, my name is Manuel. I've been working in the sustainability and environmental space for the last 6 years. And I started my career as environmental manager of a furniture manufacturing company. And at the same time, I was conducting research for my PhD, working with sustainability or manufacturing companies in general to help them implement an environmental sustainability strategy. 4 years ago, I started a consultancy, KBS, with my colleagues. And 2 years ago, we launched a software company, ecoWheel, which helps organisations implement effective health and safety, environmental and quality management systems. So today I'm going to be talking about developing and maintaining an effective ISO 14000 environmental management system. And I guess it's a good time to explain what I believe to be an effective management system. And an effective EMS is one that not only helps you to reduce your environmental impacts, helps you to save money, engages your staff, and also provides the infrastructure for you to critically talk about your environmental performance. So I'm going to begin by giving you a brief background to the environmental management context here in New Zealand and introduce to you an environmental management maturity model. And on that basis, I will present you the ecoWheel framework, which is broken down into 3 stages, and progressively the ecoWheel framework is introducing principles and tools that you can use to actually progress your organisation down your sustainability or environmental management journey. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So this is a quote from New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, and essentially what it says is if you're not actively integrating environmental management and sustainability into your business, then you may no longer be in business in the near future. And this is a very important concept, obviously, for us here as environmental managers. And it's actually good to see quite a number of people in the room today, because I can tell you 6 or 7 years ago there wouldn't have been this many people here. And what that tells me is that you are at the table, but we actually have to bring a lot, or many more people to the table here in New Zealand. As you know, New Zealand relies very heavily on its clean and green image. And in my experience, that image doesn't always connect to what is the reality. So a number of years ago, the Ethical Investment Research Group did some research into environmental management practices of organisations around the world, and New Zealand companies performed very poorly comparatively to other developed countries. And so I see that as an opportunity for us as environmental management professionals to actually help organisations in New Zealand make some progress. And so this slide nicely follows on from that sort of introduction. And this is a quote from the Small Business Advisory Group to the Ministry of Economic Development. New Zealand companies need practical and implementable advice and support to improve their environmental performance and to derive business benefit from the recognised or certified environmental sustainability of their products and processes. So essentially, that's repeating what I've already said. New Zealand companies are currently, in general, struggling to keep up with the growing requirements for environmental management and sustainability, and it's up to us to help them out and help them progress. So this is the environmental management maturity model, and essentially what it does is it allows organisations to be classified in 4 categories, and those are 4 maturity levels, and those maturity levels signify the level of environmental performance of the organisation and the level of commitment of the organisation to sustainability and environmental management. So defensive companies and many New Zealand organisations fit into this category are ones that don't really do too much in the environmental space. They are driven by legal compliance, so they'll only ever implement initiatives if they're forced to by law. And the real problems for these companies is that they have a limited management support or no management support in the environmental area. So the managers actually perceive environmental management to be a cost to the organisation. Proactive companies understand that there are cost savings to be had from implementing environmental improvement initiatives. And they generally have one person in the organisation who is responsible for managing the environment, but they actually struggle to engage the rest of the staff in the organisation and help them with their initiatives. Their initiatives are often focused around eco-efficiency, so waste and energy management, and they do a fairly good job, but most of the projects are on an ad hoc sort of a basis. Managed organizations realize that they're driven by customer requirements or ethical principles of senior decision makers in the organization. And they often have an environmental management system which is systematic and repeatable method for actually reducing their environmental impacts. But some of the challenges that they face is the focus on bureaucracy and documentation. And finally, the most advanced companies have an integrated level of environmental management maturity, and they realize that there's a competitive advantage to be had from doing things the right way from a sustainability and environmental management perspective. And these companies don't just look at the eco-efficiency or aspects of environmental management, they look at the whole life cycle of their product or services, and they use a collaborative approach to engage with their stakeholders internally and externally to make progress. So I actually think it's quite an interesting exercise for everyone to think about where their organisation fits within this maturity model and how on that basis you can actually make progress. So we've heard a lot about environmental management systems already today, and I just want to, I don't want to go into any technical sort of depth, but my understanding of the environmental management system is it can be used as a really effective tool to operationalise your environmental management or sustainability strategy. And so obviously it's based on the Deming cycle of plan, do, check and act, and the international standard for environmental management systems is ISO 14001. And so one of the things that I want to sort of note is that I have worked with a number of organisations who have been certified to ISO 14001, and in many cases you'd have to say that their systems don't actually fit the definition of an effective system. So they meet the box-ticking requirements of some of the standards, but I don't think that companies should rest on their laurels once they've achieved certification for ISO 14001. It really is a continual journey, and it's more than just ticking boxes and having documentation. So with that in mind, looking at the global uptake of ISO 14001 certifications, you can see that there's been a relatively steady trend here, and in 2012 we've got over 130,000 organisations worldwide that are certified to ISO 14001, and over 55,000 of those certifications are in China alone. And in Germany I think there's around 6,000. And if we look at the New Zealand situation, depending on what data you look at, whether it's the ISO data or the JASAN's data, we've got around 260 organisations here in New Zealand certified. And in my experience, some of the reasons for the limited uptake here in New Zealand, well, there's multiple reasons, but we have many small and medium-sized companies, and they actually perceive ISO 14001 certification to be a really complex and bureaucratic sort of a system, and they don't necessarily think that system sort of connects with the way that they actually do things on a day-to-day basis. And other organisations sometimes don't perceive any value in 14001 certification. And you can perhaps link that to the idea that many organisations achieve certification to 14001 when often in reality the systems aren't always effective. So what are the characteristics of an effective EMS? As I sort of alluded to earlier, developing an effective environmental management system is a journey. And it's a journey that you can't do overnight. Okay, so that journey actually starts with commitment from management of the organisation. If you don't have the commitment, the real commitment of management, you're not going to ever have an effective EMS. Okay, so if that's a problem in your organisation, I'm going to introduce some principles and tools in a moment that you can use. Employee engagement is another key factor. And you'll often find that employee engagement is related very closely to management commitment. So if you've got a CEO or a director of the company that's really excited and pumped up about sustainability initiatives, then you'll likely see a sort of a trickle-down effect to employees, because employees generally like to get involved if they feel that there is real buy-in from senior management. Okay, so in terms of the next point, it's important to note that there's no one-size-fits-all system for every organisation. And so the system that you develop has got to be flexible and compatible with the products, the people and the processes that in your organisation. So anyone can download a procedures manual from the internet, and you might even be able to get it certified, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you've got an effective system. So make sure it's simple and not focused solely on documents. So with that background, I want to introduce to you the ecoWheel framework. And essentially this is a three-staged approach which aligns to the environmental management maturity model that I introduced earlier. And at each stage we're trying to overcome the barriers that companies typically face in moving forward on their sustainability or environmental management journey. So the ecoWheel framework begins with the baseline, and essentially what you're doing here is developing the infrastructure for an effective environmental management system. So you're moving the organisation from a defensive approach to a proactive one. And as I said at the start, I'm going to be introducing a number of key principles and tools on the way through. So one of the key barriers that I identified a moment ago was the lack of management commitment in organisations. And that lack of management commitment often stems from the mental model that senior decision makers in the organisation have in relation to environmental management or sustainability. So whether they perceive sustainability to be an opportunity or a threat to the organisation actually has quite a profound effect on how integrated environmental management becomes in the organisation. So depending on whether they see the glass full or half empty, it makes a major difference. So if we look at sustainability as a threat, you might consider legislation and global warming and the introduction of the emissions trading scheme or waste levies to be a sort of a compliance issue. And if that's the way you look at things, you're most likely to have a defensive approach. You're looking at it from a threat perspective, the glass is half empty. If you look at it, sustainability is an opportunity to create competitive advantage and to actually take advantage of the clean and green image that New Zealand already has and develop products and services around the sustainability space, then you're very much more likely to integrate sustainability and environmental management into your day-to-day activities. So if we delve a little bit deeper into the specific barriers that organisations face at this level of environmental management maturity, often organisations I find have a head in the sand sort of an attitude in terms of how they perceive their environmental impact. So many companies don't actually think that they have a large environmental impact, and that's obviously not a driver for them to make any real, implement any real improvement initiatives. As I mentioned earlier, they often perceive environmental management to be a cost to the organisation legislation, and the market may, in my opinion, be brainwashed into actually thinking that we are cleaner and greener than we are, whether that's from a consumer perspective or from a business perspective, and that's probably not ideal. In terms of New Zealand organisations, many of them are small and medium-sized enterprises, and these organisations have limited financial and staff resources available, and they lack the knowledge and experience to make progress in this area. So this is the initial baseline framework, and it's made up of 4 tools that you can progressively use to overcome the barriers that I've identified in the previous slide. So the 4 tools are stakeholder analysis, SWOT analysis, life cycle inventory, and environmental improvement project prioritisation. So I'm going to introduce these tools in a little bit more detail on the basis of a number of key ecoWheel principles. So the first one is to be inclusive. And we've heard a lot about stakeholder engagement already this morning, which is really fantastic. You need to understand and engage your internal and external stakeholders. So you're the environmental manager in the organisation. It's your job to make sure that things are happening in this area. But if you want to make your job easier, you need to engage your colleagues and make sure they get involved. You need to interact with external organisations and individuals and help make your job a lot easier. It's all well and good being the lonely greenie in the office, but if you really want to enjoy your job a lot more and make it a lot more successful, then interact with your stakeholders. And so, who are your internal and external stakeholders? Internally, you've obviously got staff, you've got senior decision makers, you may have board members. Externally, you're looking at your customers, your suppliers, you're looking at auditors, local businesses, competitors, consultants, universities. There's a whole range of different stakeholders, and they're going to be different for every organisation. But once you've identified who those stakeholders are, understand what their interest is in your organisation's sustainability performance and how they can be engaged to facilitate the success of your environmental management system. So one of the examples I like to use is the stakeholder of a university. So in New Zealand, we don't really take advantage the resources that universities have here in New Zealand. So I've worked with a range of organisations that have actually engaged student interns to help them with their environmental improvement projects. And this is a really fantastic way of doing things because it's a win-win situation. Students like to have that work experience, and you as an organisation, you can get a relatively cheap resource to help you with your improvement initiatives. And if you're interested in that, I've got some connections at the university, so I'm more than happy to talk to you about that further. The second ecoWheel principle that I'm going to introduce is to be strategic. So understand why environmental management is important to your organisation and what you actually want to achieve with your environmental management system. So the tool that relates to that principle is the SWOT analysis. So looking at the strengths, the weaknesses, opportunities and threats in relation to environmental management or sustainability. So if we look at the strengths, what existing internal capabilities does your organisation have? Do you have an existing health and safety or a quality management system? If you do, this is a really good starting point because, as Chris said, they can easily be integrated and it makes your system a whole lot more effective. Looking at the weaknesses, what are the internal obstacles? If you don't have the support of your senior management, then you need to realise that and make sure that you're addressing that issue. Opportunities, are there external opportunities available? Is there an opportunity to create new products or services around sustainability and environmental management? And threats, are your competitors already doing something in this space? Is there impending legislation? Those are some of the key strategic issues that you need to consider and note down. We've already heard this term today, pick the low-hanging fruit. So be systematic and create momentum within your organisation. This relates very strongly to being able to engage and get commitment from your senior managers. So show them the financial benefits of environmental management. So I'm going to introduce now a case study of a furniture manufacturing organisation. And when my colleagues started working with this organisation 6 or 7 years ago, the senior managers of the organisation were quite sceptical about environmental management. So we needed to sort of convince them that it was a good approach for the organisation. So the way to do that was we've talked about scope already this morning, Callum, to actually limit the scope of your environmental management system initially to those areas of the product life cycle that your organisation can directly control. Obviously, from a sustainability perspective, you've got to look at the whole life cycle of the product, but that can become complex very quickly. So just start by making those initial wins with the limited scope, and you can always expand that later on. So I'm going to give you an example about how you can identify your environmental impact and using a very simple process mapping tool. So if we look at this furniture manufacturing case study, there's a range of processes that occur within that initial scope. Now if we note those down, and this is obviously very crude, but it's a simple tool that you can use, and looking at the inputs and outputs in each of those processes. And once you've done that, you've got a list of the different waste and environmental impacts that are occurring within your operations. So once we've identified what those environmental impacts are, obviously as part of an EMS, you've actually got to evaluate how significant those impacts are. And we can use a number of different criteria to do that. So in this case, let me see if I can use this flasher button. Yep. We're using 5 different criteria. So the first one is what are the cost implications of reducing the impact. The second one is the volume of the impact. Severity, is it toxic or non-toxic? Legal and market requirements around it, and the ability of your organisation to control that impact. If it's something that's occurring up or down your supply chain, you've got less control over it if it's happening directly in the factory. So looking at these 3 examples here, this organisation found polystyrene in the packaging material to be a significant impact in relation to those 5 criteria. And what we're doing is we're giving it a score out of 5, and then we're multiplying that total by 4 to get a total out of 100. So I'll just show you how I got to that. And it can be quite subjective, but you can develop your own matrix with different criteria to match the different numberings. So this is the polystyrene packaging example, and by reducing the impact, the organisation could achieve direct and measurable financial benefits. So that gets a high rating. There was a high volume of polystyrene that was going into the packaging, so it gets a high rating there as well. And because there was no polystyrene recycling facilities here in New Zealand, all the polystyrene was going into landfill, so it was a relatively significant environmental impact. While there were no direct legal requirements around reducing the polystyrene packaging, the company had been approached by a number of different customers who wanted to have some support on how they can actually get rid of this pile of polystyrene once they'd unpackaged their new piece of furniture. And control. This was occurring directly. The organisation was doing the packaging of its product, so it had a relatively high level of control over that particular aspect of the business. So given that it was found to be a significant environmental impact, this was a really good point to start the project, the environmental management project in. So the company launched a project to reduce the impact of the packaging, and while the polystyrene couldn't be replaced completely because polystyrene does a really good job of protecting the product, there were significant reductions to be made, and so in this case we reduced the polystyrene by 15% in the product and saved $100,000 a year. And that's a sizable amount. The company then went on to win an award for this innovative piece of design work, and it was like a switch that flipped overnight. All of a sudden, the skepticism that was there at the start changed around, and there was real momentum, and this provided a really good platform to actually establish a more comprehensive system. So that's the baseline framework. I'm going to talk now about the strategizing framework, which is the second part of the ecoWheel framework. And this is about in the first part, organisations are maybe implementing a number of ad hoc initiatives here and there. What we're doing in this framework is actually creating a strategic platform with objectives in the long term that are part of an overall strategy. So the first ecoWheel principle that I want to introduce as part of this framework is to be holistic. So in the first case study, we limited the scope of the EMS to the manufacturing and packaging and distribution parts of the organisation's operation. But from a sustainability perspective, you need to look at the whole life cycle of the product. So include all aspects of your organisation and your system. So this is now a case study of an Auckland-based carpet manufacturing company. They began their environmental management and sustainability program in 2007. And they already had started their environmental management system. However, there was only 1 or 2 people involved in that system, and they wanted to actually engage all their staff, and they wanted to look at not just the waste and energy impacts of the product in their own operations, but the wider impacts across the life cycle. So, as I mentioned, they'd already established a number of programs as part of the EMS, looking at waste, energy, training, and environmental management system certification. But in working with us, we helped them to understand that there was a wider number of programs that they needed to include within the EMS. So looking at stakeholder management, greening the supply chain, eco-design of the product, and product stewardship. So taking the products back at the end of the life. So once you've established those programs, it's important to make sure that you can manage them effectively. So breaking the overall objectives down into manageable milestones. So you can't achieve these things overnight, particularly if you're a New Zealand company that's got all these other things going on. Environmental management isn't the only thing that you're doing, but you can have an overall picture as to where you want to go. You can break that overall goal down into multiple achievable levels. So you're not going to achieve 100% recycled materials from suppliers overnight, but you can start to engage with your suppliers and then slowly build that platform. So this is what we call the ecoWheel visualization tool, and it's a tool that we use often with our clients. And essentially what it's doing, it's breaking down the environmental sustainability strategy of the organisation into a number of different areas. And you'll notice that those areas are the areas that I pointed out in terms of the programs of the organisation's environmental management system. Now within each of those programs, you're creating an objective-based roadmap, essentially trying to come to what is considered to be industry best practice in the particular area that the company is operating in. So for example, under EMS certification, you might find that ISO 14001 is industry best practice, but there's a roadmap in terms of achieving ISO 14001. So in this case, it's been broken down into the 5 criteria of the standard. You might just as well choose Enviromark, bronze, silver, gold, platinum, diamond to reach your best practice. And the reason why this is such a powerful tool is because everyone can understand it. And it helps you to communicate with your different stakeholders, whether they be internal or external, where your organisation wants to go in terms of the different areas, looking at the whole picture, where you are now, and what are the milestones in between in order to help you make progress. So the darker shadings signify that the organisation has made some progress in this area. And it was very successful for this particular carpet manufacturing company. So from 2007 onwards, they made some fantastic achievements in energy, waste. So I'm now going to show you how to develop your own ecoWheel. And as I mentioned, or as I want to mention, is that this ecoWheel framework is specific to each individual organisation. That's the power of it. It's simple to develop, but you need to make sure that you're looking at the elements that matter in your particular organisation. So choosing those programs that relate to what your company does. This is going to be very different from a sugar manufacturing company or a university or an Auckland council, for example. Everyone's going to have their own issues. And I suggest that you work with a number of stakeholders internally and externally to actually communicate and develop this strategy together. So once you've developed those programs, and this relates closely to the scope of your EMS as well, you need to have a policy that makes sure that you're going to put the resources into place to actually meet the commitments of your strategy. Once you've developed that policy, looking at what industry best practices in each of the areas of your program, and then working backwards to understand what the steps are that you need to take in order to achieve that industry best practice or world-class performance. And so we do that with all the programs. So we establish what industry best practices in each of these areas, and we develop a step-by-step roadmap. And it's simple, but very, very powerful. Okay, so once we've developed that strategy, it's all about integrating it into the organisation and making sure people are doing it on a day-to-day basis. So the sixth ecoWheel principle that I want to share with you is to be transparent. So communicate with all your stakeholders regularly and provide them with access to the information that they need. This is very important. And so whether it be internal communication or external communication, you can't communicate enough. So if we look at internal communication, for example, there's a range of ways that you can do things. And traditionally, there's a sort of a folder on the shelf approach, and often I find this can be quite difficult to manage, and it doesn't really get people excited. But one of the things that I do really recommend is, if you haven't already done so, develop a green team or put together a green team from people from different areas of your organisation, and meet regularly to discuss the issues and decide on what the important things are that you want to tackle. In terms of, there's other ways of communicating, like traditional notice boards. Obviously, from an external communication perspective, be very careful about what you communicate in the public domain. Don't make up things, and because if you do get found out, as Chris said, you can be on the front page of the Herald in no time, and it takes a very long time to establish a credible reputation, but it only takes one poor piece of marketing to ruin everything for you. And obviously there's software systems as well, which I'm more than happy to talk to them about further later on. So once you've developed this strategy, it's all about engaging your staff. Okay, so we talked at lunchtime about putting responsibilities around the environmental management system within the organisation, making sure it's not just one person in the company who's doing everything. You'll still be environmental manager, but you need to engage with people within the organisation to get the jobs done. Okay, so those responsibilities need to align with the day-to-day responsibilities of the people. So, for example, if we're talking about an engineering manager in the organisation, they might be interested in waste and energy management. You can help them with that. If you're an HR manager, they might be the right person for the training and culture role. And as I said, you can use the ecoWheel as a powerful communication tool, because everyone in the organisation is on the same page. They know where you want to go, and they know what the different issues are. And again, you don't have to tackle everything at once. You can still decide that we're still focusing on waste and energy at the moment, but product stewardship is a key issue, for example, in the future. So you're seeing what you're currently doing in the context of your overall strategy. And then once you've put together your green team, you can start to put together resources and work towards achieving the different objectives and making progress. And it's really exciting for people to see a barometer of your current performance. And obviously that's not a static, the ecoWheel is not a static thing. As the market changes, as technology changes, your idea of what constitutes best practice can change as well. The next ecoWheel principle that I want to share is to match industry best practice in terms of the standards, work towards certification that matters to your industry and to your customers. So as we probably all know, there's a whole range of different eco-labels and certification schemes out there, and it's quite confusing for the customer and also for us as environmental professionals to understand which ones are the right way to go. So in New Zealand, for example, there's three distinct environmental management system certifications that I know, and you need to choose the one that's right for you depending on the market that you're operating in and the size of your organisation. We've heard from Chris Bailey already today in Environmark, a fantastic way to move step by step towards ISO 14001 certification. So that's really a good program that I can recommend. Eco-warranty is a simplified version of ISO 14001. So if you're a small company that's maybe not so exposed to the international market, that might be the way to go. And finally, ISO 14001, obviously if you're a larger organisation, you might choose this one to be the one to go for. So those are the environmental management system certifications, but there's obviously a lot of specific product certifications as well. And these shouldn't be a separate part of your system. They should definitely come under your overall environmental management system strategy. As I mentioned earlier, your EMS is there to operationalise your environmental strategy, and your objective might be to make progress in the eco-design domain because you've identified the products that have a high environmental impact. So you might say, for example, that look, we're going to go for environmental choice. So that could be an objective of your environmental management system. And the final ecoWheel principle that I want to share with you is to integrate your system. And we've heard about this already today as well. Make sure that it's a good idea to create one overall business risk management system that integrates health and safety, quality, environmental management, food safety management, whatever other risk management systems are appropriate for your industry. And the reason for doing this is because it's very much it's very efficient for your organisation. It creates, improves staff awareness. They don't have to learn 4 separate systems, removes the duplication and documentation and procedures, and it makes it easier for people to understand and manage. And obviously there's a significant reduction in the costs of audit because the auditor can come and do everything at once rather than in 3 or 4 separate sort of trips. And you can use the ecoWheel framework for any of the different systems that you're operating. So just to sum up the 8 ecoWheel principles that I've introduced today. So be inclusive. Don't be the only one in your organisation that's involved in environmental management or knows anything about it. Engage your staff members and your colleagues. Be strategic. Think about the different issues that are happening within your organisation and in the marketplace. Pick the low-hanging fruit. Gain momentum by proving to your organisation and to the managers in your organisation that there are real financial benefits that can be achieved. And once you've done that, you can then expand the scope of your environmental management system and be more holistic. Manage projects, so break it down into manageable milestones and be transparent. Don't put rubbish into the marketplace that isn't true, because if you get found out, you can be in trouble. Match industry best practice and select the standards and certifications that are relevant to your industry and integrate your system. So just to sum up, I'm finding in my experience every day that organisations are finding sustainability and environmental management to be very challenging, and they perceive things to be very complex, and it's up to us as environmental management professionals to simplify things for those people. So an effective EMS requires a structured and strategic and well thought out management approach. And I've presented to you today in very brief format the ecoWheel framework, which hopefully some of the principles at least can help you to embed sustainability and environmental management into your day-to-day business and make it easier for you. So that's, thank you very much for your attention.